Let me tell you something about the Porsche 911 GT3 RS that nobody puts in a review. The moment you see one in real life, not on a screen but actually parked in front of you, something happens that I genuinely was not prepared for. It's smaller than you imagined. The wing is bigger, the paint is louder, and for about 30 seconds you just stand there feeling slightly stupid because you've watched videos about this car for years and somehow it still managed to surprise you. That's the GT3 RS, a car that has spent decades living so far inside the enthusiast imagination that the real thing almost can't compete with the version we've built in our heads. And here's what I want to talk about today. Not the lap times. You already know the lap times, not the spec sheet, but the full arc of what the GT3 RS actually is. What it promises, what it delivers, and what you have to come to terms with before you can truly understand why it exists. Because I think the GT3 RS might be the most honestly dishonest car ever built. It promises you everything, and then it makes you work for every single bit of it. I want to take you back to 2006, because that's when the modern GT3 RS story really starts, and it starts with a number, 7 minutes and 54 seconds. That was the Nürburgring lap time Porsche posted for the 997 GT3 RS in 2006. With a naturally aspirated flat six, no hybrid assistance, no active aerodynamics, and a base price that, while not cheap, was at least theoretically attainable for someone who had worked very hard for a very long time. I remember reading about that lap time as a teenager and doing the maths on what it meant. This was a road-registered car built in Stuttgart that you could theoretically drive to the Nürburgring, set that lap time, and drive home. Not on slick tires, not with a professional driver in a closed session. Just a car, doing what cars are supposed to do at a level that genuinely defied explanation. That's where the dream starts. Not in a showroom, not in a configurator, in a lap time that made no logical sense. And Porsche understood exactly what they were selling. Every generation of the GT3 RS since has been built around that same core promise, that somewhere between the engineering department in Weissach and the front, straight at the Nordschleife, they had found a formula for making a road car behave like a racing car without actually turning it into one. The 991 GT3 RS, launched in 2015, pushed that Nürburgring time to 7 minutes and 20 seconds, faster than some GT3 race cars. The 992 GT3 RS, the current generation, lapped in 6 minutes and 49 seconds, a time that puts it in the same conversation as hypercar machinery, costing 3 to 4 times the price. And the way Porsche achieved this, the specific engineering decisions that produced those numbers, is where the dream becomes something more complicated, something more interesting, because the GT3 RS doesn't cheat. It doesn't rely on four-wheel drive to mask its limits, or a turbocharged tsunami of torque to overwhelm the physics. It earns every tenth of a second the hard way. The 992 GT3 RS runs a 4.0-liter naturally aspirated flat six, producing 518 horsepower. In an era where turbocharged engines have become the default answer to every performance question, Porsche chose to keep the GT3 RS naturally aspirated, not because they couldn't turbocharge it. The 911 Turbo S, which shares the same basic body shell, makes 640 horsepower with 2 turbos. But because the character of a naturally aspirated engine, the linearity, the response, the way it rewards you for working it to its limit is inseparable from what the GT3 RS is trying to be. The active aerodynamic system, Porsche calls it DRS, generates up to 409 kilograms of downforce at high speed. The front and rear wings adjust automatically based on speed, cornering load, and braking force. The front axle lift system, which raises the nose over speed bumps, doubles as a downforce management tool at circuit speeds. It is, in aerodynamic terms, closer to a Le Mans prototype than a road car. The chassis is a racing chassis wearing road car qualifications, barely. double wishbone front suspension, the first 911 to use this layout, with titanium connecting rods and ball joints that require replacement every 50,000 kilometers. Center lock wheels borrowed directly from the 911 RSR race car. A gearbox with shift times faster than most human nervous systems can process. This is the dream, not just a fast car. A racing car that somehow passed road car regulations. A piece of engineering so committed to a single purpose that every compromise feels like a choice rather than a concession. And then you live with it. Here is the first thing that happens when you drive a GT3 RS on a public road. You become aware, very quickly, of every imperfection in the tarmac beneath you. Not because the suspension is harsh in the way that cheap sports cars are harsh, sharp, brittle, uncontrolled, but because it is so precise in its communication that the road surface becomes a constant, detailed conversation between the car and your hands. Every expansion joint, every patch repair, every slightly crowned country road, the GT3 RS has an opinion about all of it, and it shares that opinion through the steering wheel with a directness that takes some getting used to. This is not a criticism. It is, in fact, one of the things that makes the GT3 RS genuinely extraordinary on a circuit. The same communication that makes a bumpy-ass road feel relentless is what allows you to place the car with centimeter precision through a fast corner, because you always know exactly what the front tires are doing. There is no filtering, no softening, just information, constantly, honestly, without interruption. But here is the thing nobody tells you about that level of feedback when you're watching a review video filmed on a closed circuit on a perfect day. It is tiring. Not unpleasant, never unpleasant, but genuinely demanding in a way that means a 2-hour motorway journey in a GT3 RS requires more concentration than the same journey in something 3 times cheaper. And then there's the noise. I want to be careful here, because the GT3 RS exhaust note is something I genuinely struggle to describe in a way that does it justice. At low speed, around town, it's a mechanical, purposeful sound that draws attention without being antisocial. As the revs build, and you have to build them, because the GT3 RS rewards commitment, it develops into something that bypasses the brain entirely and goes straight to whatever part of the nervous system handles involuntary responses. Above 7,000 RPM, approaching the 9,000 RPM red line, it is one of the most viscerally exciting sounds I've encountered from a production car. But it is also constant. It fills the cabin. It makes phone calls difficult. It makes podcasts essentially impossible above about 4,000 RPM. It is the price of admission for a naturally aspirated engine tuned to this extreme, and it is a price that, depending on your daily reality, you may or may not be able to afford. The practicality conversation is brief, because the GT3 RS is, by Porsche's own admission, not trying to be practical. The rear seats have been removed in favor of a roll cage preparation kit. The boot space that exists in a standard 911 is partially occupied by the rear wing's structural mounting points. The front storage area, the frunk, is usable but modest. This is a 2-seat car with a small bag in the boot and a wing that will absolutely scrape the exit ramp of any multi-story car park you are unfortunate enough to attempt. And the price. The 992 GT3 RS launched at around $220,000 in the United States. In the United Kingdom, over £200,000. In most markets, it sold out immediately, with dealers attaching significant markups on top of list price. Finding one at retail required either a long-standing relationship with a Porsche center or a willingness to pay premiums that, in some cases, exceeded the list price by 50%. This is, objectively, a significant amount of money for a car that will shake parts loose on a bad road and refuse to stay quiet at highway speeds. And here is where I want to be honest with you, because I think this is the part of the GT3 RS story that most reviews skip past too quickly. The reality of the GT3 RS is that it is a genuinely difficult car to own as a daily driver. Not impossible. People do it. And some of those people clearly love the challenge, but difficult in ways that the dream version of the car, the one that lives in lap time videos and magazine road tests, does not prepare you for. But here's the other side of that reality. On a circuit, on the road it was actually built for, the GT3 RS does something I've never experienced from another road car. It shrinks around you. The complexity disappears. The noise becomes a rev counter you can hear rather than read. The communication through the steering becomes the most useful information you've ever been given. Every system that felt overwhelming on a public road reveals itself as a tool that was waiting for the right context. The GT3 RS doesn't become easy on a circuit, but it becomes coherent, and the coherence, when you find it, is extraordinary. I've been thinking about why Porsche keeps building the GT3 RS in an era when it makes less commercial sense with every generation. The 911 Turbo S is faster in almost every real-world context. It costs less. It's more comfortable. It will outsell the GT3 RS by a significant margin in every market. And yet Porsche continues to pour engineering resources, genuinely disproportionate engineering resources, into a car that deliberately limits its own usability in pursuit of a purity that most buyers will never fully access. I think the answer is that Porsche understands something important, that there is a version of automotive excellence that has nothing to do with being the fastest or the most powerful or the most accessible, that the GT3 RS exists to prove a point about what a road car can be when the only constraint is the homologation regulations and every other decision is made purely in service of performance. It is, in that sense, the most honest car Porsche builds. Not because it hides nothing, it hides plenty underneath very expensive carbon fiber, but because it makes no pretense about what it's trying to do. It is trying to be the fastest road-legal car around the Nürburgring that you can theoretically drive to the track. Everything else is secondary. If you accept that premise, the GT3 RS makes complete sense. If you don't, it will frustrate you endlessly. And I think that's the acceptance the GT3 RS asks of you. Not acceptance of its flaws, the ride, the noise, the price, the impracticality. Those aren't really flaws. They are the direct consequences of decisions made in pursuit of something specific. The acceptance it asks for is more fundamental than that. It asks you to accept that the best version of something is not always the most comfortable version, that a car can be genuinely, deeply, uncompromisingly excellent and still be wrong for 95% of the situations you'll actually use it in. That the 6 minutes and 49 seconds around the Nürburgring costs something, and the cost isn't just money. I think about the cars we've talked about on this channel. The C6 Corvette, which was the last honest American sports car. The GTR, which rewrote the supercar rulebook. The 370Z, which was the last thing Nissan built before it forgot how to have fun. The F10 M5, which was the last BMW built for drivers. All of those cars had something in common. They were built by engineers who had a specific argument to make, and they made it without apology. They trusted that somewhere in the world there were drivers who understood the argument and would value it. The GT3 RS is that instinct taken to its logical extreme. It is the argument made at maximum volume, with every resource Porsche's engineering department could justify dedicating to it, with zero interest in softening the message for an audience that might prefer something easier to live with. And standing next to one, really standing next to one, close enough to see the way the wing mounts integrate into the bodywork, the way the wheel arch extensions flow into the wider track, the way the whole car seems to be slightly tensed, like it's waiting for something. I find that I've made my peace with all of it. The noise, the ride, the price, the impracticality, the version of the car in my head that was somehow simultaneously smaller and more overwhelming than the real thing. The GT3 RS is not the car I imagined. It is better and harder and more specific and more demanding and more rewarding than anything I had built in my head over years of watching lap times and reading spec sheets. And I think that's exactly what it was always trying to be.